We are recording for YouTube. All right, I think we're ready, Mark.
We are. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 39th episode of Lit Balm. And tonight we have some amazing features, including, of course, our special MC tonight, Indran Amirthanayagam. And then the feature is Susana H case, Stephen Dunn, and Maurya Simon, and I expect it's going to be quite a cracker.
And Margo Taft Stever at the end. Yeah.
Exactly. And next week we have Founders Reading, December 26th, kind of a holiday party, including Mark, myself, Jonathan, Cassandra, Larissa Schmeiler will be appearing and reading that evening, and also with special guests Grace Cavallari, Joshua Corey, and Kyla Rodney. And January 2nd, our New Year's party with Lloyd Schwartz, Christina Marie Darling, Rick Lupert, Jessica Wilkinson from Melbourne, Australia, and Willis Gordon with his guitar. So please do join us for those as well. And I think we'll move on to hearing some of Jonathan's new work, or work that he's curated. Jonathan, in 1998, founded Unlikely Stories, an electronic journal of literature and art. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to a number of literary and artistic ventures such as Mad Hat Inc., the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He's organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chat from Virgin Press, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust from Unlikely Books, Prosthetic Gods from New Synths Press Wing City Chapbooks, and Standard of City from Lit Fest Press in 2016, and more recently, the free eChat backstories, which you can download from Argotist ebooks. Will you give us a reading, Jonathan?
Thank you, Mark. Full house tonight. This is exciting. So as regulars know, I'm not very prolific, and I usually read something that we've published at Unlikely Stories, or in this case, in an unlikely book. I'd like to read to you from Type Scenes by Rodney A. Brown. Rodney comes in sometimes, and they're a fantastic performer in their own right. But tonight, I'd like to read from their book, Type Scenes, which Unlikely Books published this year. This is called Enter People in Great Financial Need and Those with Lesser Need, again by Rodney A. Brown. Enter roses, enter trust, enter energy, enter responsibility, exit responsibilities for others, enter a blue hearse entering a road, enter doubt, exit doubt, faithfulness enter sight beyond pretexts, enter communion, enter wounds, enter chastisement, enter what we need, sweet blood of Jesus enter joy, enter Paul, enter power, enter explanation, enter people who are hanging upside down, enter offense, enter spiritual sensitivity, William enter servants, exit leaders, enter justice, people enter own desires, exit particular eyes that are opened, heaven enter, expectations of people enter openness, enter closed-mindedness, exit energy, exit conversation, Black experience enter verdicts, enter academic support person, BV rolls in, enter employee fears, enter adaptations, enter I, enter you, enter rooms that are small, enter the time it takes to get through the end, other side, enter a BB box, enter patience, enter spaces to taste free food, enter the patience to listen. All right, and again, that was from Type Scenes by Rodney A. Brown. Next up, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Cassandra Atherton. Cassandra is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. I read it, it's fantastic. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, An Introduction, and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. She is commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine. Cassandra, are you reading for us today?
Yes, absolutely. So my last commissioned project was earlier this year. I had to write 21 ekphrastic prose poems, and strangely enough, because I'm obsessed with the Pre-Raphaelites, it was on Pre-Raphaelite paintings. So this one is called Proserpine, after the beautiful Pre-Raphaelite painting from 1874. There is freedom in summer, in blue heaven slurpees and al fresco dining. My lover throws the sheet from his body and the sun stripes his legs like bright stockings. Sometimes we open the window and the breeze is jasmine in the morning, burning citronella candles in the evening. One time he suggested we go to Bath in June to prolong our season, drink champagne with chilly mussels and look out over rooftops from an apartment with a turquoise door. But I promised to spend winter with someone else, drinking hot chocolate with marshmallows, burrowing beneath the king-size doona. When blossom starts to creep across the branches, a book arrives in the mail with 6 pomegranate seeds pressed between the pages. And I'd like to introduce the wonderful Mark. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, a translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He has published 14 books of poetry, including more recently, Becoming the Sound of Bees, Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, and Here Comes the Night Dust. Vincennes' newest collection, The Little Book of Earthly Desires, and a novella set in ancient China, 3 Taos of Tao, or How to Catch a Fortuitous Elephant, are both forthcoming in 2021 from Spite and Dival. An album of music, ambience and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is also forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also a prolific translator and has translated from German, Romanian, and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Merz for White Pine in 2018, which was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Merz's selected poems, An Audible Blue, is forthcoming from White Pine Press in 2021. His poems have been published in so many amazing journals, we can't possibly say them all, but here's a little snapshot of some of them. The Nation, Plowshares, the Los Angeles Review, World Literature Today, Raritan, Asymptote, and Plume. His work has received fellowships and grants from the Swiss Arts Council, the Literary Colloquium Berlin, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Whitner-Brinner Foundation for Poetry. Vincennes is editor and publisher for the brilliant Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He has lived all over the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain. And for all the regulars, you can probably join in, where there are more coyotes and bears than people. Thank you, Mark. I hope you'll read for us.
I will. This is a little snippet of a book I've been working on called Father Trash, A Cruel Creature. And this section is called Martha's Haberdashery. Made to measure, even if your children grow. Headgear from the discerning human. Imagine your life in a year, the sign said. Which way will you grow, it said. Either way, we've got you, fat or slim, tall or short. We know we've got an eye. You know we've got an eye for it, else you wouldn't be here. And so here we are, clamoring for our vanity, for all our buttons and bells and ribbons, clamoring for less is more or more is less as the wind blows. And yet, did you ever consider where the shirtless, trouserless, dressless, buttons go? In which windmill it conspires to fasten itself. Not so for the burrs on which Velcro is modeled. They snag any fair fur and do their voodoo just like Mars, the cruel god of war, bringing together loose ends. In the end, they will sink to the bottom of the ocean. And just like Frederica with her trays full of beer, carry us over into the slop and splatter of other worlds. And another little one. A sun in another galaxy. Halfway here nor there, for a moment amazed at the night, knowing all space is mysterious, a downward trend. All right. Just a few more seconds and the sun will explode. And now we move on to our guest MC tonight, who is the amazing Indran Amirthanayagam, a gentleman who has produced not a very unique record in this year by publishing 3 new poetry books written in 3 different languages. They include The Migrant States from Hanging Loose Press, Sur l'île nostalgique from La Matin, Paris, and Lyrica a tempo, Mesa Redonda from Lima, Peru. Indran writes in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. He has published 19 poetry collections and recorded a spoken word music album on Rancourt Doubt. He edits the Beltway Poetry Quarterly, and he loves to see new submissions, by the way, the Beltway Quarterly. He also helps to curate abolicionistas.com. He writes on Indran Amirthanayagam blogspot.com. He won the Patterson Poetry Prize, received fellowships from the Foundation for the Contemporary Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, the US-Mexico Fund for Culture, and the MacDowell Colony as well. You contact him, he's everywhere. He's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, he's on Gbook, he's on HPG Book, all sorts of books anyway. You can find him. And he's just recently, not so recently, well, fairly recently, started the poetry channel on YouTube. Join him there. He loves for people to send him recorded poems of their work, of work they have translated in many different languages. I think it's a beautiful project in the making. Let's hear from Indran.
Thank you. A bit of exaggeration there in the bio, but I won't question it. I'll just read. Thank you very much, Mark. I don't know about HPG, for example. I don't know what that is, but anyway. I'm going to read a poem from this book called Coconuts on Mars. It's called Living Will, and then we'll turn to our first feature for the evening, Susana Case. Living Will. One day I will sit down with my soul and write that I've loved every bird that flew, every monkey on the branch, every elephant charging through the grass. I will say I love you as much as the baby gecko scampering past my foot, the snake rustling under the wood cut and stacked in my yard. I will say I have loved every creature, every song, every turn in the road, and I will be lying with my eyes open and my eyes closed. I'm not God. I'm not even the dog loyal to his master who misses him blind, like his daughter in Lima, which I call at night until the next time we meet in dreams via chat, cheek to cheek, remembering always that in paradise there are no trains or roads or seas or death, no going away, no arriving, doors and garden open, souls who come and go smiling, and all the angels, all birds, all dolphins, all men and women in song dancing. And why not reciting the Song of Solomon, the epic poems, the love songs that consoled when we set off on the roads, hopped on trains and aeroplanes, got caught in traffic, in our head, said goodbye before saying hello. Did I know you down there? You were the greengrocer I walked past going to school in London. Oh, my dear, how beautiful you are, Pauline, with ripe red hair. who shared the religion prize with me at St. Vincent's on Blandford Street. But you may be alive still, and I'm not ready to meet my maker, to be plucked from the cycle of rebirth. Not yet. I have poems to compose, children to raise, earth to cultivate. Come back later, angel. I have my will to revise. Thank you. It's an enormous pleasure for me to introduce the poets featured this evening, all dear to me. Susana H. Case is the author of 7 books of poetry, each one better than the previous. The most strongest one just out now, Dead Shark on the End Train from Broadstone Books, which won her a Pinnacle Book Award for Best Poetry Book in 2020, and the New York City Big Book Award Distinguished Favorite. She's also the author of 5 chapbooks. Her first collection, The Scottish Cafe from Strapling Hall Press, was re-released in a dual language English-Polish version, Kawi Arnia Scotcha by Opal University Press. And she's also been translated into Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. Case is a professor and program coordinator at the New York Institute of Technology in New York City and can be reached through susanahcase.com. If you're interested in a signed copy, do contact her there. Otherwise, please order on Broadstone. Her books are available at broadstonebooks.com. Let me leave you with the amazing Susana H. Case. Thank you.
Thank you, Indran. And I put contact information for me because who can remember, website address, and also some links if you're interested in the book in the chat. So I'm going to read largely, but not entirely, from Dead Shark on the End Train, which you can see here. It's a 1930s WPA painting of the New York City subway system. I live in New York City, and the city figures in some of my poems, and I live off the East River, which is also a character in some of my poems. This is an example. It's called The East River Isn't Romantic Anymore, which are actually the lyrics from a rock song. 16 miles of saltwater estuary that can't make up its mind in which direction to nudge the tugboats extends south from the arched bridge at Hellgate. Once a mass of ice got stuck, and for a few days commuters could cross on foot between Brooklyn and Manhattan. They've cleaned up the water from when human waste was dumped, when Harry Houdini performed his first wooden crate escape with shackles and straps. Swimmers practice park to Manhattan, where every year some jumper drowns. It's where the suicides go, are the lyrics of the rock song, like the father of a man I once loved, who locked up his dress shop and, arm dangling from the car window, smoked his last Marlboro as he drove down Montgomery Street, never braking. The city's machinery fished out the car, bleeding water, and him, a man who no longer needed to make up his mind. So there's a lot about gender in this book, and there are a few, I guess you'd call them celebrities, mentioned in the book. And one of them is Marilyn Monroe, who I seem to have a bit of a fixation on, because there's a poem of hers that tends to appear in at least the last several of my collections. And a lot of people don't seem to know that she wrote poems, but she did. They were not published in her lifetime, although they were later. And this is called The Unpublished Poems of Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn in a striped swimsuit reading Ulysses, photographed by Eve Arnold, 1955. She wanted blondes to be thought sexy and astute. She wanted herself to be thought astute. Blonde, pejorative, 19th century, as in Dizzy Blonde, as in A Blonde Moment, as in risque British burlesque performer, as in French courtesan Rosalie Duthay. Marilyn left fragments of handwritten texts, crossed out words, inserted phrases, her memories, dreams, fears enjammed. The public knew only the lines of her Cupid's bow, but no silly woman would stand by Arthur Miller as he refused to name communists. Marilyn, surrounded by 430 books with penciled notes, writes to herself, "Our life, they have cheated you." Another celebrity, quote unquote, who appears in Dead Shark on the N Train is Maria Callas in this poem. And there are some unmentioned characters in, just to let you know, the other people referred to are her Aristotle Onassis, of course, with whom she had a love affair, and Jackie Kennedy, who was the other part of that triangle. So this is called Diva. If you're forced to sing as a child and you hate it, you'll replace devotion to singing with love. If the man you love pushes you to retire from the world, to serve only him, your talent just opens a hole in the earth for you to fall through. And if you're the chubby, ugly duckling as a child, in your mind, you'll always be the chubby, ugly duckling, even after you bring in piles of money, a public waiting online for days to hear you. Even when you lose so much weight, you stress your voice, you'll be the difficult one, the one who is gossiped about when the man you love isn't the man you married. If the man you love leaves you to woo the most famous woman in the world because she represents America, more refined, even thinner than you, you'll hole up in your apartment until he begs you to take him back, threatening to crash his Mercedes into your building if you won't. But if you've abdicated your power, agreeing to be the lesser wife, you don't have the only thing a man obsessed with power wants. It doesn't matter that you feel like a woman. He will disappear for weeks, forget to phone, call you a cunt with a whistle in her throat. Still, you'll sneak in through the service entrance to see him one last time when he's dying. His canary, you'll call yourself, your voice cracking on the high C. I wrote this poem for a childhood friend of mine when she was dying. Death has come in, with a line from Eliot. Angus Barbieri, Scotsman, holds the Guinness World Record for the longest liquid fast. Lasted over a year before eating a boiled egg and a slice of buttered toast. 3 people fit into his old pants. Angus went on to live a happy life. Wife, kids, kept off the weight. You are not going to have that egg. Cancer 2.0 has launched. 3 weeks with only lemon ices and ice chips, your lump the size of a grapefruit next to your colostomy bag from the last bout. The doctors have nothing more. Even the television you love so much has spent its capacity to distract. Last time you were in hospital, we argued about politics, Kavanaugh on the screen. I yelled a lot about gender and stalked out. I am not a nice person. I sit here thinking mostly of myself, my relief the big C got you and not me. In the room, the women come and go. They jot on charts, no one talking of Michelangelo or time, except when the religious guy comes around. Burial plans, where, which dress, a sundress, a wig. How can I, a person full of words, not know what to say? You were always my best friend, you tell me, and try to smile. The truth is, we have not been close since high school. I want to touch you, but do not want to touch you. I am not a nice person. I cry, not out of empathy, repelled and scared. Your covers are pushed down and too much of you shows, and I don't say anything, and yet I put that shriveled flesh in this poem. The winter winds blow outside. The air is stifling. I pull off my scarf, my sweater, heap knits on a chair. I roll up and fold, unfold and roll out my hospital pass. This is Anne Peacock's In Trees, and fog at night lingering, and a black bear with rope strung through his snout, and a boy pulling it who offers to pose for photos, and what seems to be furniture in a chai shop, but is a man in rags, asleep upright, and a radio that plays only static, and everyone coughing, and a tourist who brags in broken English of the 50 grams of dope he smokes each day, and a night watchman who takes a bribe to unlock a tower with a marble casket, and the Taj Mahal in moonlight before the workers shout to open the massive doors, and the ghosts of suicides who jump from the stairs near the gateway, and the beggar who offers to leap into a well for rupees, who, when I say no, looks down in disappointment. I'm going to end with a poem I hadn't intended to read, and some of you might have seen me quickly getting up and pulling out a file and rifling through my folder. But since we were in such a wombatty, on such a wombatty subject at the beginning, I thought it could be fun, especially since a lot of these other poems are heavy, to end with this one, which is, it's a form which I usually don't write in, but it's the opposite of an aphora. It's called an epistrophe, and every line of the poem ends with wombat. So it's not my typical kind of poem, and it's called Obtuse and Furry, which was Christina Rossetti's description in Goblin Market, her writing of a wombat. Obtuse and furry. They wrote and traded poems on wombats. Christina Rossetti's brother Dante also drew wombats, splendiferously rotund wombats, admired for their patience, well-mannered wombats, amenable to being scratched, itchy wombats, a Victorian obsession with wombats, though only one of their crowd of wombat fans ever went to Australia, where wombats live. Thomas Woolner never mentioned wombats in his letter home, sent with stamps of wombats. Dante spent hours with Regent's Park Zoo wombats, traveled to the Paris Zoo for rare hairy-nosed wombats. While in drug rehab in Scotland, Dante had a wombat sent to his London home, yearned to clasp my wombat, which slept at dinner in a wombat-sized dining table centerpiece and left wombat droppings, strangely cubic, the shit of wombats on the carpets. Christina built it, an Italian wombat shrine, but Dante's had mange, common in wombats, was listless, fell ill. Dante got another wombat. It died also. Dante stuffed the wombat, put in the front hall to greet visitors, a butler wombat. His self-portrait with dead wombat shows him weeping. He sketched a wombat behind William Morris's wife, Jane. She holds a wombat leash and, like the wombat, wears a halo. Jane, mistress of Dante, some say the wombat Dante depicts is William, whom Jane disdained. Wombat-like, obtuse and furry, fated to be badly mated. Wombat, misused by Dante, like the wild wombats. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susana. Wonderful. The poet of the wombat. You've got a nickname now. I'm very grateful that the poems you just read. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Stephen Dunn. Stephen, I met first in the summer of 1992. We were at the MacDowell colony at the same time, and he was very kind to me, and he beat me, trounced me in table tennis and ping pong quite often, but he also helped me with my poems and commented on my first book, which I'll always treasure, his kindness and generosity. Also in inviting me to read. I think I sold more books, of the copies of that first book at the reading I gave at his university than in any other place, so always be part of my memoirs. But anyway, getting to the work, Stephen Dunn has written many books, including the recent Pagan Virtues, published by Norton, and the book of essays, Degrees of Fidelity. His Different Hours was awarded the Pulitzer Prize, and Loose Strife was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Among his many other awards are the Academy Award in Literature from the Academy of Arts and Letters, the Patterson Award for Sustained Literary Achievement, and fellowships from the Guggenheim and the Rockefeller Foundations. He lives in Frostburg, Maryland, with his wife, the writer, Barbara Hurd. And Stephen asked me to read some new poems of his for him, and so I will be doing that right now, and with great pleasure. And let's see, I'm going to begin with the 6:10 to Happiness, just a thrill of a poem. I'm peering a little bit because I don't have my glasses. They're not quite the right size now. The 6:10 to Happiness. The 6:10 to happiness is always on time, though the cars are overcrowded with Americans in pursuit of what's been promised them. If you're lucky enough to get on, it's said that love is only one stop away. Legends abound. One of them is the signs for happiness are obscured by signs saying, don't be a fool, and this way to disappointment. Those who manage to return say the 6:10 takes months, sometimes years to arrive. And even the few waiting with open arms don't speak a language you've ever heard. But this is the legend that endures. Everyone who comes back comes alone, some with stories filled with moments of joy, and even of relationships that have lasted beyond the early sexual thrills. That's why tickets to the 6:10 are always in demand, and people like myself who would not mind being fooled or disappointed if love were the reward might pay extra for a window seat, the better to see in advance the lure of happiness, the problematical lay of the land. The contrarian's advice to himself. Because he who laughs last probably didn't get the joke, and he who laughs at himself will not be laughed at by others. Try to think of the sadness latent in laughter and say something consciously joyous about it. Remember, you're a contrarian, and as such, something opposite is expected of you. Precision will always be more radical than passion, because it is harder to come by. But precision without passion will cause a dry exactitude, when what's called for is a punch in the nose. When in doubt, choose the latter. Just don't allow yourself the apparent ease of doing nothing. Remember, many a false step has been made by standing still. And if you believe that genetics has given you one face, but your job is to create for yourself another, try not to worry when you fail. So much that's worthy occurs by accident. The Bible couldn't have been written by people who thought they were writing the Bible. And now the poem Elementary. 1. There was death, and there was the occasional touching, which reminded the body it was alone. And there was the weeping and the laughter, which understood death and the laughter we couldn't bear. 2. There was the house or the apartment, and there was the office or the factory or the field, and there was sleep, and there was the in-between. If work was satisfying, love was possible. If we loved power, there was an emptiness that never stopped needing to be filled. 3. There were fire, water, air, and machines that made them ours. There were wild things and things on shelves, and there was boredom when the rain fell, boredom on the most beautiful days. After the pleasures came, we wanted them to return and got sad. 4. There was play, our bodies in motion, forgetting they would die, and the sudden remembering after the sweat dried. And there were the questions, the old ones over and over, and the hard work in the yard, the routine erasures, the cleansing of hands. 5. There was language and what had to be written because it couldn't be said. And there were the translations from other languages and the daily translations of our own. And each thing in the world had a name and was waiting for a name. And there was silence with its history of bad timing coming our way again. Love poem near the end of the world. This is the world I'm tethered to. Clouds, lavender tinged, and below them russet going on green hillsides. Everywhere various aspirations of transcendence, like my fickle heart wishing to redefine itself as an instrument of hope and generosity. And flower beds with just enough rainwater to turn cracked soil into a vast blossoming. Something keeps me holding on to a future I didn't think possible. There's sweetness and there's squalor. There are sad, almost empty towns, occasionally brightened by fireworks. And there's you, my love, volcanic but quiet now, utterly serious. Fascinations. How can we not be fascinated that auks use their wings to swim underwater? And flies often find themselves in the bad neighborhood of a web, stuck, unable to disturb. Or when a scientist says aphids suck the life out of plants, many who don't care about the buzz of language will not hear the gorgeous sibilance of S's. The world is made up of experts who devote their entire lives to such little things. They edit magazines on ant migrations and examine why the tiny shit of worms merits our close attention. And those deeper thinkers who claim every secret contains another secret also have been known to insist that vacations prove a life of pleasure is overrated. The man at the casino who plays 00 at the roulette table is fascinating too, as is the pit boss who believes good luck is a hindrance to happiness. It's foolish not to be pleased that a belief in God is helpful to those in need of consolation. Fascinating, though, that the prayerful keep praying, never seem to be disturbed by the absence of meaningful communication. This one's called The Color of Nightfall. Hovering over the day, staccato arcs and dashes of marigold, mauve, dark berry, and lime that seem to leap and converge. No attempt here to resemble or fool with nature, but to catch hold of the feelings I was left with after a stroll through what now is a memory of a stroll through a landscape so dense I couldn't tell green from greener. The color of nightfall is charcoal, and new words are often needed, like verdancy or the fluorescence of avocado, to help lighten, even separate this mood I'm in from the mood I'm trying to remember, garish and melancholy, but still not fully named. I'll read 2 more poems of Stephen's. This one is called During the Pandemic. Many claim for themselves an understandable loneliness, though for some it was a continuation of a way of being, habitual, tiresome, hard to befriend. In the evenings, less lonely by luck or temperament, we'd wet our souls with wine, try to legitimize who we were by vowing not to nod to nonsense. We were used to filling our lives with good cheer and the little thrills of invention, yet we noticed how many lies kept being repeated until they sounded like the truth. People were dying and getting shot in the back and knelt upon until breathless, alone, like never before, with our private obsessions. Some of us understood part of being excluded is the need to take back everything. You can't expect anyone will ever give you. And then I'll finish with, after the argument, it was one of those hotels without a 13th floor, unnamed, but there, an elevation that belonged to someone else's superstition. I went right up to room 1422, where I found myself missing nothing really, a peppermint on my pillow, bad abstract art on the walls, and other trappings of normality. I was tempted to call my wife and apologize, but our fight happened just before dinner and I was hungry. So I called room service and asked if their outrageously juicy burger could be delivered to the mystery of room 1322. I think I wanted to be chided or corrected, but this was a classy, therefore humorless hotel, and room service merely complied politely, although my order never arrived, and waiting for it, I must have fallen asleep in some gray zone where guilt lives with the maybes and almosts of long marriages. Because when the phone rang, I thought it was her, but it was only the concierge asking how had I liked my food, and could he do anything more for me in 1322, to which I said, no, that was not possible. Magnificent, Stephen. Thank you very, very much for these poems.
Thank you.
I would love to read more, but I think I am not sure how our time is, so I'll stop there. Thank you, Stephen. What an honor and a thrill for me you've given me to allow me to read your work to a full packed audience. Now let me turn now to a very dear friend from Mount Baldy in California, Maurya Simon. I first knew of her work through books that she published with Copper Canyon some time ago, The Enchanted Room and other books that I was struck by her time in South India and inevitably felt very connected to her through that experience. And then I've been reading her ever since. Her volumes of poetry include The Wilderness, New and Selected Poems, which received the 2019 Gold Medal in Poetry from the Benjamin Franklin Independent Booksellers. Her poems have been translated into Hebrew, French, Spanish, and Farsi. Recent poems of hers have appeared in Poetry, the Hudson Review, and the American Literary Review. She is a professor emeritus at the University of California at Riverside, and she lives in the Angeles National Forest in the San Gabriel Mountains. There are places where you could go. You can find her work at Barnes & Noble, at Amazon, at IndieBound. Have a look there, and at Books A Million for the poetry of Maurya Simon. Maurya, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Indran, Jonathan, Mark, Cassandra. Also, is it possible for you to disable the chat function while I read?
Sure.
Yeah?
Let's see here.
Okay, I find it distracting.
Okay, it's gone.
Thank you. Wonderful poems. Thank you so much from Susana and Stephen. Just fabulous. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
Yeah?
go ahead.
Okay.
Sure can.
So I'll start with a fable. It's called Aging Backwards. And in some ways, I suppose it's an anthem for our times. A man awakes one morning and discovers that he's miraculously become a child again. His pajamas swim around his shrunken body in long waves of flannel, and he finds his gold wedding ring has slipped off his finger in his sleep and lays marooned in the middle of his bedroom floor. A sob catches his throat like a saw going through a stubborn wood knot. He shoves a chair beneath his wall mirror, stands on it, and sees a kindergartner staring back. He tries out his voice. It squeaks like a mouse's. He weeps, his small frame wobbling and weak. Where is his wife? What will she do or say when she witnesses how reduced he is? How can he possibly drive to work, face his boss, or even reach the pantry's whiskey shelf? Then the man's wife bursts into the room, spangled with daylight as if with white dust. Darling, she says, get dressed. Let's get going so we can pick up some groceries en route. Strangely, she makes no other comment, but looks him up and down with interest. Strangely, his bedside clock and wrist pulse have stopped ticking. His head throbs. Sex between them has always been like a demolition derby. Now she purses her lips and arches her eyebrows up a notch, as if assessing whether he's up to doing it. Honey, he whispers, I'm just a kid now, or rather, again, and it wouldn't be right. Even her silence is loquacious, so that, for a moment, he imagines her thoughts bouncing about their bedroom like ping pong balls, but her comments sound like Sanskrit to him. What's wrong with your voice? She finally asks. His miniature hands flutter in the air, his little feet shuffle back and forth as he strides lightly out the door and into the gaping world. And he sings brightly in his tiny, boyish voice, oh, how dire are the rosy fires of change. On some hand-me-downs from God. Well, mortality's one of the cloaks you tossed in the bin, as well as sin, I suppose, and all this endless yearning for some divine inspiration. You also tossed forgiveness into the Goodwill box, so casually, I'd have thought it was a pair of dirty socks. But there's another inheritance I guess I ought to thank you for, faith. Though it's worn so thin and ragged, it's nearly diaphanous, like a nylon banner hung out for eons from the roof of the world. You kept all the best stuff for yourself, universal health care, archangels, Capuchin monks and Capuchin nuns, eternal life, 4D sunglasses, that pristine garden with its sagacious fruit and peaceable kingdom. In short, you live in splendor, at least metaphorically, and we human mortals go from thrift store to consignment shop, hoping we'll find some treasure that you forgot to hoard. A pastoral. Dictator Idi Amin's 100-room wildlife lodge, scattered along Uganda's White Nile, is now a ruin, housing warthog families, sheltering in its kitchens, as well as armored pangolins and porcupines who scout out mossy bedrooms and crumbling verandas. Occasionally smirking jackals, leopards, and red-assed baboons prowl the vacant rooms, sniffing the scent of smaller game and doing a variegated dance of reclamation. Somehow they coexist harmoniously, these overlords of hunger, while the ghosts of the 300,000 souls whom Amin killed roam the savannah's rough lands like barren winds. How ephemeral our lives, how utterly reliant on blind luck or circumstance. Well, here's a cheerier one. It's called On Endurance. Because the gardenia was Freud's favorite flower, or so he told Hilda Doolittle, I look on it warily. Because the world is too much with me, I sweep up the noise of the ocean and siphon it into my ears. Because there is cunning in the sideways walking crab who scuttles near my toes, I honor her hunger. Just as I honor the ruins of all the ancient fallen cities, Troy and Machu Picchu, Pompeii and Petra. And because death is incorruptible, but life, oh yes, is corruptible, for it careens and mutates, humbling us, so that though the tiger's breath is rancid from a rotten tooth, she still licks her cub's paws clean underneath a palm tree's shade. And because a fossil rose bloomed 40 million years ago, I look on it with joy. I think I'll end with a poem from my last collection, The Wilderness, which is graced by a painting by my mother, LA artist Bela Goldenthal. Came out in 2018, and I think Indran mentioned it in his lovely introduction. This poem refers to what you're probably all aware of, what are called venereal terms, not the disease, not the genital disease, but the reference to groups of animals or things, such as a sloth of bears or a colony of beavers or a peal of bells or a babble of cell phones. And in this poem, there is an appearance of a murmuration of starlings. I wrote this poem in 2011, but it seems quite pertinent today, especially because it mentions the Roman Emperor Nero, who I've been thinking our soon-to-be former president is very much like. So here's the poem. Dawn over the Tiber River. 100,000 starlings rise skyward in fluid streams and swelling throngs, spinning, looping, stretching their tripping flocks like taffy above the platinum shimmering water. Their 10,000 cries are like stampeding waterfalls or electronic music gone viral in the chilled air. A 5-mile-long serpentine river of dark speckled birds is rushing headlong into a new day at the end of a terrible year, a year full of terrors, death of thousands from the Fukushima tsunami. Oh, death of my beautiful, delicate mother, and death of my husband's lonely, soldiering father. But the day is born anew. the starlings singing and winging their terrifying joy into a world that's fresh with dew on the surfaces of cars and bridges and ancient Roman ruins. Only look, there's the fallen Emperor Nero, crowned with a dripping ring of bird guano. Simply to be born is enough sometimes, much harder to endure. Thank you.
Thank you. What a beautiful poem to finish, Maurya, and a magnificent work throughout. Thank you. What a reading this is, and I'm moved very deeply. And also, I need to keep quiet and introduce the next poet, because we're not here to hear my gushing. Let's leave. You know, the next poet is actually a poet who's equally, I love her work, and as editor of Beltway, we had the pleasure of nominating one of her poems for the pushcart this year. So we're thrilled to have published her in the magazine. Margo Taft Stever collections include Cracked Piano, which was published by Kevin Carey Press in 2019, Ghost Moose from Cattywampus Press, also 2019, The Lunatic Ball from Cattywampus Press, 2015, The Hudson Line, Main Street Rag, 2012, Frozen Spring, which won the Midlist Press First Series Award, and then an earlier book, Reading the Night Sky, from Riverstone Poetry Chapbook Competition. So she has been writing for quite some time, excellent work. Her poems, she also is an essayist and has written reviews. They've appeared widely in magazines and anthologies, including the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Poets.org, Verse Daily, Plume, Prairie Schooner, Connecticut Review, Salamander, Upstreet. She's the founder of an institution that I've come to love and respect. It's such an amazing place, the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I think the programming director is with us this evening as well in the audience, Jennifer Franklin. Margo Taft Stever founded the Hudson Valley Writers Center and is the current co-editor of Slapering Hall Press. She lives in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and you can find her online at margotaftstever.com. Go ahead, Margo.
Thank you so much, Indran, for organizing this reading. And I also wanted to thank Mark, Cassandra, and Jonathan, who I just met tonight. And it's so exciting to be with people from Australia. Thank you for reading your work. I wanted to start out with 3 ekphrastic poems from my collection. This is what it looks like, although the cover is pretty dark, so you probably can't see it very well. But I wanted to screen share a few poems, the visual images on which they're based. And this is the first. It's titled, this poem, a lot of cracked piano, many of the poems deal with the thin line between sanity and insanity, using my great-grandfather, Peter Rawson Taft, as a case study. He almost died of typhoid fever, and then which happened 3 months after his college graduation. And a few years later, because he never fully recovered, or for other reasons, he was hospitalized in a Cincinnati private hospital for the insane. Hospital superintendents sometimes held balls for their patients as part of a humanistic movement of the time, and my great-grandfather attended such an event. The Lunatic Ball. After Dance in a Madhouse, a lithograph by George Bellows. Furious dancing gives way to screams. 5 men stare, ghoulish, at the wall. This is the Lunatic Ball. The best student Yale had ever seen. 3 months after graduation, typhoid brain swelled inside his skull. They dosed out calomel. 5 ghosts appeared in a mercury dream. Headaches unbearable. This is a lunatic ball. Married 1 year, baby the next, his wife filed for release. The medical textbooks he gleaned, futile, endless stall. A woman names her baby doll Christ, lurches, leans, a building in an earthquake, then she crawls. This is a lunatic ball. One man plays a flute, calls himself Faunus. Another uses an invisible latrine. Attendants haul out a wild man in a straitjacket on a wooden beam. A woman growls like a bear. This is a lunatic ball. Behind a glass wall, well-dressed spectators riveted sit amused, looking at them, looking. The patients know they are through. Spectacled men sport great coats, and laced up women make jokes in the shimmering hall. And that actually is true that they did often have spectators, not always, but frequently. The next poem I would like to read was inspired by the Horse Fair, the painting, which is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and was painted by Rosa von Ur, and she lived between 1822 and 1899. Horse Fair. In men's clothes, she makes herself invisible to examine anatomy at the slaughterhouse. She obtains a police permit to wear trousers while she sketches. At the horse fair, she draws horses pulling, snorting, heads bumping, thrashing, hooves pounding, tails ringing, charging forward, rearing, bucking, wheeling, disappearing into darkness. Hooves hammer, whips crack, horses writhe between seer and seen. The fairground a battleground. Frenzied pitch, cymbals clash, arms flail, whips raised against the horses' arched and shining necks. Eyes bulge, terrified. The dapple gray, the roan, pull away toward thunder. And the last poem that I would like to screen share is inspired by Van Gogh's self-portrait with bandaged ear. And the title of the poem is Van Gogh to his mistress. He sensed his ear, but he could not see it. In the blind, this is called blind sight. The last failed effort of the body to survive. Keep this object carefully. The ear rested on the table alone among blue tints and suppressed shadows. To present an ear in the middle of the night, an arterial flap of bat's wing, wing of angel. So another theme that runs in cracked piano is the mercurial role of mercurial role of mothers and the subjugation of women. So the next poem is set in El Salvador in the 60s. Nothing's holding up nothing. El Salvador. Can you hear me? Can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Yeah.
I hope you can anyway. Nothing's holding up nothing. Under the floorboards with the wood rot, the insects, ants skittering to and fro, the mother hides with her child. Her nipples in the infant's mouth, but her milk won't let down. She did nothing, but the officials suspected, decided to make an example. The child dragged out, beaten, the bellies of flowers blackened, the bells, the long toll of roots. It is hard to believe anything was ever alive under here, under these boards, anything alive for long under these boards. Filaments break off in powder as if they never were wood, as if the hollows were roads going somewhere, as if the mother's breast could fill with milk, as if her child could breathe again. I'll read one more poem from this collection titled Idiot's Guide to Counting. How do you become one with the horse, riding and becoming the act of riding, and the horse becoming the self in the other at exactly the same second, counting strides, counting muscle movement, counting fences, hurtling over them with the horse, counting the everything of one? How do you count? How do you pull a muscle turning over in bed at night, measurements that change everything, counting back to everything, the everything of one, the pulled muscles of the back of one, the entanglement of one, the waves of particles, counting back the quantum? How to become one with the branches of a tree, a grandfather tree in an apple orchard that no longer exists. Separate one from tree, horse, counting numbers, counting the grandfather tree to find the solution of one. Counting trees, leaves, counting everything as no longer existing, counting trees as one with the everything that no longer exists. I wanted to read a few poems from my chapbook, also published last year, which has a cover that's so light that you probably can't see it either. But many of the poems in this chapbook are about the sixth extinction, which we're currently witnessing, which is one of the greatest in the history of the earth, and the only one, however, precipitated by humans. This is a title poem, Ghost Moose. Searching for moose, the children run down to the river, calling the already gone, the forgotten, for freedom of stench, the smell of skunk weeds. Moose calves become ghosts, rubbing fur, skin, scraping ticks off on tree bark. In mild winters, ticks multiply and multiply, occupy moose calves, killing them slowly. Their mothers witness starvation from blood loss. Moose calves resemble ghosts, tearing fur, skin. Calves waste away, wasted bodies frighten the forest floor. Foresters call April the month of death. Also, I have a poem in this collection which mentions Marilyn Monroe, so I thought I should read it in celebration of Susana's poem. Beauty parlor. A pedicurist clips a hangnail from a client's big toe, while Monsieur Mark, cultivated Belgian, whittles away at her hair. He praises her Botox, only 5 injections, her face now full and taut. In 1905, blondined hair was scandalous. Over a century later, I'm trying to make mine as platinum as possible. Bleach out, then blend with the gray growing in, cut down on visits and costs. While I stamp out outward signs of age, my stylist, a striking woman who was recently a man, talks about her boyfriend in a soft, masculine voice. On the corner below at Lex and 28th, we observe a woman, blonde hair straggling, like Marilyn's on her way down. But this woman's roots have grown in, 3 inches of black. What a shame, exclaims Monsieur Mark. The woman stumbles, gropes the trash can. Body bent over, off balance, oddly leaning, she careens, wobbles into the street. Bus brakes screech, she hawks green phlegm. Must be on crack, says one client. Mr. Mark wonders, why doesn't she do something with her hair? And I think I'll read one more poem, which is also from this collection. And the subtext for this poem would have seemed impossible even a few years ago. End of horses. I write to you from the end of the time zone. You must realize that nothing survived after the horses were slaughtered. We sleep below the hollow, burned out stars. We look into dust bowls searching for horses. When you walk in the country, you will be shocked to meet substantial masses on the road. We do not know whom to blame or where the horses were driven, who slaughtered them or for what purpose. Had the horses slept under the linden trees? The generals and engineers pucker and snore on the veranda. Thank you.
Wow,
Thank
that
you
was
very
so
much, Margo.
wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moira, and thank you, Margo, and thank you, Indran, of course,
Thank
for
you.
your fantastic curement, and thank you, Susana, and thank you, Stephen. This was an amazing night.
It has been, but the brilliance is about to continue with a little open mic that we have. So if we can jump straight into that, and then we might have just a reminder about the other brilliant lip balms that are coming up. But the first person we have is Ralph Culver. Is he in the house? And can we unmute him if he is, please?
Let me find him real quick. Good thing I know my alphabet. There he is, Ralph Culver. Ask to unmute.
Thank you, Ralph.
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
It's staticky.
I hope. Okay, I'll try to I'll try to clear my throat. What a wonderful evening of poetry. I asked to read this evening because I'm sure, as probably many of you know, we lost a wonderful poet in Marvin Bell a few days ago, who passed away. And in Marvin, I lost a personal friend and a teacher. And I just wanted to read one poem from his book, Incarnate, which is published by Copper Canyon, his collected Dead Man poems. This one is called About the Dead Man and Silence. 1. The dead man has cultivated an alien silence. Amid cacophony, his deepest ear remains at low tide. His insides go quiet. He has turned down the amp, curbed the snaky squeal of the mic, and asks now a favor of the audience. He asks the audience not to applaud early, for he holds within him a solitude within crowds, a sanguinity in air, and a buoyancy at sea. To have been this way when younger would have meant no schooling, no job, no offers for his soul. In geezerhood and beyond, the dead man has thrown a blanket over the make-work dissonance of the national treadmill. Humor, in the face of the inevitable, has been fundamental to an existential absurdist like the dead man. That and earplugs. 2. More about the dead man and silence. To the dead man, silence is the norm, interrupted at intervals. The dead man listens for silence while the earth rumbles. He hears the molten lava churning in the planetary core. He registers the interruptions of wind assailing the trees. He does not seek it in the traffic of ether or in sleep where the machinery of ears makes dreams of bees and swordplay. To know pure silence, he will have to stop his pulse, neutralize the magnetic pull of each particle in the universe, and just stop. To just stop will mean no more swish or fizzle or bubbling, no delusion of an interval. Then the music. In the meantime, don't ask. he won't hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Silence
Good
in that.
travels, Morgan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It was amazing. I love the bit about silence in particular in the second part. The next person we have is Adelaide Valda Silva. Is she in the house? I'm not sure I've seen her, Jonathan, but you might have a keener eye.
I don't think so. If you're here under a different name, please say so in the chat and I'll unmute you.
Well, we might continue and come back if Adelaide says that she's here. So we've got Edward Wells, I think, is next. And now if we've got a spot, I've just been asked by Michael Folds, who can perhaps read after Edward, if that's okay. So Edward, where are you?
There's Edward.
Fantastic. Okay, take it away.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So I'm going to be reading from a piece that is a creative reading of The Remarkable Voyages of Captain Cook by Rhoda Bloomberg and The Wild Orphan by Robert Froman. The remarkable wild, an unknown continent, a term used to mean geographers were positive. Imagination to run riot, writers depicted gems and jewels. It was late afternoon in March. From that moment on, a privileged passenger, passionately interested in botany and zoology, cut off from the outside world, an unusual man. Official instructions to proceed southward, to make discovery, to describe the people, to cultivate friendship and alliance, to take a correct observation of the transit of Venus. The first voyage was a tunnel into the side of the hill, a quarter of a mile down the valley. Busy unlocking the great rusty padlocks and swinging the huge door on its squealing hinges. Once he overheard, but thought they wanted him to overhear. He was positive he was dealing with spies, more interested in fortifications than flowers.
Wow, that was wonderful. I love the last line. Ooh. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. A beautiful reading of it too. I'm hoping that I can prevail upon Michael Folds to read next. Is that okay, Michael?
Ask to unmute.
That's fine with me, Cassandra. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I love your background. It's great. It's amazing.
It's my workroom.
It's great.
Thank you for the opportunity to read. I really feel privileged because the people who have read before me are fantastic. It's really great to hear. I'm going to read a poem called The Momentum. I like to watch movies with lots of intrigue, lots of violence. The movies that warn the following is for mature audiences, contains gore, nudity, language, smoking. It's the smoking that really gets me. Most of the time, no one smokes. But it's easier for the censors to put that in as part of the blanket than to view each and every film end to end. When someone does smoke, I often wonder if it's the brand the scriptwriter smokes, or if it's the brand I smoked back in the day when a line or two, a needle, a cactus bud, a sugar cube or candy heart were as readily available as smokes, though not over the counter as the herb is today. I joked with my friends that my body was a test tube, a lab to see what worked, what really worked, to take me to that other place, and what didn't. When I got sick, I moved on and away. The surprise when one of my old pals passed was not what it should have been. A reaction more like, must have been some really bad shit. The cynic never far behind. If you survived it all until the scene was over, when the thrill was gone, when you thought you'd done it all but die, there was life to consider and getting on with it. The marvelous, normal things people do when they plan on growing old, dying peacefully. No lightning, no thunder. A guy I knew used to joke he wanted to go out at 75, shot in the back by a jealous husband. Actually, he was shot in the stomach at 35 and never walked again. I tried a few times to put out my own lights. The last effort ended up not such a great idea, kind of boring, really. A long couple of nights in and out of bed to piss, the rest of the time lying in the dirt in a dark field of dried flowers, wondering when the scenery was going to change. It never did. A distant voice inquiring, "Is that what you really want?" Death gave me momentum to cruise the known and unknown worlds. I was one of the lucky ones, or was I? The door is always open until it's closed. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Gore, nudity, and smoking. I say we need more of all of them. But no,
Yeah,
it's
I
beautifully
can do
crafted,
that.
really well read.
Thank you.
The last person we have is Cindy Hochman, who's going to read for us in this brilliant Lit Balm.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I like your hat.
Well, since I'm wearing this cockamamie Christmas hat, I may as well read a Christmas poem, right?
Please do.
The elementary school I went to was called the Clemency Moore School, and Clemency Moore wrote A Visit from St. Nick, which we all remember as Night Before Christmas. So I'm following in his footsteps, but I'm doing the pandemic version.
Great.
And it's called CDC Guidelines for Christmas 2020, Ray St. Nick. 1, don't let Santa Claus come to your town this year unless he presents you with proof that he's tested negative for COVID. Better check it twice. 2, don't let Santa Claus come down your chimney. Block the flu if you have to. Did you get that little pun? Unless you want to spend all Christmas morning sanitizing the glass from which he drank that milk you left for him with the fig Newtons. 3, don't let your kids sit on Santa's lap this year because he might infect them, and then they'll infect you and grandma and grandpa too. Besides, he's got alcohol on his breath. 4, don't let Santa near the tree this year unless you're certain he has plenty of soap, hand sanitizer, and gloves in that big fat sack of his. 5, don't let Santa in your house this year because Mrs. Claus warns that he's too proud to ever wear a mask over his long, white, lethal beard. And he has spent way too much time in his workshop right in the faces of his tiny, germy elves. He's a very hands-on boss. And finally, 6, don't let Santa venture out from the cold North Pole this Christmas. He's old, obese, eats too much sugar, his reindeer have been coughing up a storm, and furthermore, he voted for Trump.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much, Cindy. I love the hat. It works perfectly with that. So I guess I should say, let's hear it one more time for the amazing, amazing poets on Lit Balm and Indra's marvelous curation of them. It's been such a fantastic, well, it's morning here in Australia, a brilliant morning of poetry. And I think Mark's going to talk about the brilliance continuing. I am.
So yes, thank you, Indran, for curating this fantastic episode of Lit Balm. We couldn't have done it without you. And thank you, Susana. Thank you, Margo. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Moira. Wonderful. And once again, coming very soon, next week, for example, we have a founders reading.
I knew it was not a business call.
We have a founders reading with myself, Jonathan, Cassandra, and Larissa Schmilo, one of our founders, who will be appearing. along with special guests Grace Cavallari, Joshua Corey, and Kyla Rodney. And the week after that, the New Year's party with Lloyd Schwartz, Christina Marie Darling, Rick Lupert from California, Jessica Wilson from Melbourne, Australia, and Willis Gordon with his guitar. So please do not miss that. Well, what a show. Again, we have survived, we persevere, we have poetry, we have love. What more can we want? Seriously. Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful evening. And, take care, everybody. Keep it on the low down, as they say, or as my stepson says anyway.
And see you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Thanks for
night.
coming.